Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are building the city of Delta Coast. My name is Josh. In the last episode, we started off building somewhat of a starter community. It's profitable. We're making some money each week. We have a decent bank balance, and our population has grown quite rapidly. If you remember, we ended the episode with roughly 1,400 population. I actually let it sim for a little bit and we got to where we are without making any changes to the city. So we're in a spot where our city has grown. I don't think it's going to grow much further beyond where it is right now, and we do have significant demand for residential, commercial, and industrial areas. I have a decent idea of what I want to do today, and what that involves is breaking into this area over here, getting a little bit closer to this small pond. One thing that we unlocked last episode is the ability to place city parks. Now, with the Park Life DLC, we have access to all different types of park. One of the most basic forms of park that we can place is the city park, and it has many different assets to build a fairly basic park that our citizens can walk through. What that's going to actually do for us is increase the value of the land that surrounds it, and that's something that we're going to start to care about. Now that parks and plazas are available to us, they're also considered a city service. So if you notice, we don't have any parks that we've placed yet, and there is a significant demand for parks. We can place, these smaller park assets that are single use. That's totally okay. I might actually go and do that right now. Let's place a dog park in our residential area and see what happens. You can notice that it has a fairly large area of effect, so I think I want to place it somewhat centrally. Everyone's happy about it, and you'll see some of these homes start to turn from dark red to a slightly better color. That's going to increase the overall entertainment of the area. That's going to have a dramatic effect on overall land value. That will help our buildings level up, and that will make us more profitable because higher level buildings will pay higher taxes. So we really do care about that. Now, it did take out a home, but it will be rezoned. Now, I talked a little bit about land value, and we can actually go into the info tab and check that out here. The darker the area, the higher the land value. Now, you'll notice that a lot of the land close to shore has a high land value, and since we placed that park, some of these buildings are actually becoming higher and higher value. Our average land value is 17 units per square meter. That's okay. We want that to get better and better over time. So my thought is if we build into this area, create a modular city park using our park assets, we can really create a nice community that's a bit larger and start to really increase some of the land value. So that's where we're going to get. We'll definitely expand into this area throughout the episode, but first things first is I want to take care of our really high industrial demand. Now, I don't want to do anything too fancy. I think it's okay to just expand on the basic grid that we have. So I'm going to take this out another block or two and call it a day. Okay, that works. We will add some water. And I'm going to refactor that right there. Let's draw a straight connection. That works for me. So now that those roads are in, I think we'll plop down a tiny node of commercial and make the rest of everything industrial. And we can get rid of that power line right there and hook that up. And make sure we zone that. Cool. I think that'll help with our industrial demand. Another thing we can take care of is actually adding in some paths. So we now have paths available to us. I think we're going to stick with a pavement path, and we're going to place it just like we do roads, except it won't handle any vehicle traffic. Now, I'm going to use it fairly sparingly because I don't want to take down any existing structures, or at least I'm going to take down as few structures as possible. So what I'm going to do is find areas where a block is rather large and try to intersect it so that pedestrians have a nice place to walk. So right here makes sense. I don't want folks to have to walk all the way around to get from here to here. So that took down some houses. That's unfortunate, but that is part of the game. I'm also going to build some of these horizontally. I think that works. And I'll do the same thing and continue that over here. And I think maybe along here might be another great candidate for that as well. Maybe we'll continue this into that existing path system. And lastly, maybe bring that down a bit as well. All right, I think that's enough for right now. We did have to take out a fair amount of existing buildings to accommodate that. We lost some population. Let's be careful about doing that in the future. I think when we place down new neighborhoods, we will be a little bit more thoughtful about that and put in the paths from the very beginning. Great, so I think it's okay to start expanding into this area. I'm going to be fairly basic in my approach. I know that I'm going to want to take some of these roads out. Let's take that out as far as it can go. Let's do the same over here since these are some pretty major roadways. And I think maybe this one as well would work. Let's get that to connect up nicely using our road guidelines. It doesn't seem to want to do that, so I'll have to give some thought to how that intersects. Maybe we can back up and start to actually frame the bit of road that fronts the water. So I think I'm going to actually draw the road there now. I really like this nice feature. I'm going to try to keep those without damaging them where possible. So I think it makes sense to go around it. And I don't want to get too crazy over here. I know that I want to bring this back to our main, neighborhood system. So I think we'll do that. Maybe fix that road a little bit. Okay, that works. So we still have some craziness to deal with, but it's a little bit simpler now. So let's take this road out here. I don't think that was perfectly straight. That looks good. And I think it makes sense to... I'm going to leave that alone and figure out what to do with that in a minute. I think that makes sense. So we can cut that off. We'll deal with that at a later date. I think we're going to focus most of our development in this area. So I still need to figure out how that will link up. So let's start to kind of back into that. I'm thinking that if we were to take this road out like that, then maybe this area here would be a very interesting space for a city park. I think that's what we're going to do. So let's do that and then round that out. And we can use this area as our city park. I'm going to go ahead and designate that as our city park. I'm using the District and Areas tool, and I'm selecting a park area. Now this is kind of a painting tool. It will snap to your road, and I'm just going to fill in that area pretty roughly. Awesome. It's auto-labeled as Beach Hill. We can rename it in the future if we want. And wow, I am just now noticing that we have some severe infrastructure issues. So let's resolve that. Our electricity is low, so we can remedy that by bumping up our budget. We're already well over the 100% mark, so at some point in the near future, before we start expanding like crazy, we will want to make sure to place another electrical facility. Our water and sewage is also fairly low, but our budget is very low as well, so we can definitely bump that up. Let's confirm that that helps. Okay, we are actually still seeing some electrical issues there. I think now is a good time to build another power facility. And I think that we can also just get away with building out another block of industry. Why not? You know, this is not the most glamorous area right now. It's following a grid pattern. We can definitely rezone in the future. We will absolutely do that. This industry isn't going to be here forever, and we will find a more appropriate location for it. So I'm totally fine using the grid and just building out more and more blocks because I know it can be easily reused in the future. So no shame in that. Let's add in our power plant. Our water coverage looks okay. And we can just add industry zoning right there. Again, we're back to this problem where we don't have enough workers. That will absolutely be remedied when we have additional residential zone. You know, it's kind of unfortunate. We have so many factories that require residences. We don't have enough people to fill those jobs. That will be definitely helped by this new neighborhood. So maybe we can focus on getting some residences placed very quickly. So if we follow our existing block structure, this is the size that we have been going with. I think it's okay that it creates kind of an awkward small block. We can definitely do something interesting with that neighborhood. Maybe over here, we can do a nice little curve. And now we can start to give the rest of our neighborhood some shape. This is an interesting area, so I'm okay with neighborhoods that aren't exactly based off the grid. This will likely stay residential, you know, for forever, so I'm okay with it not following the grid pattern. Sometimes it's good to get away from that. Now I'm just placing what I think are reasonably sized blocks. Again, this is our city park area. And then maybe what we want is something that maybe snakes out a little bit and continues on in this direction. I try to avoid cul-de-sacs, so we probably want to just continue that way. And I think that actually looks quite okay. We might want to do something else over here, like maybe snake that road and have it meet up right there. That looks okay. I'm okay with roads being a little funky from time to time. Nothing wrong with that. And then maybe over here I'll try to go back to a more traditional grid. So that's the size we're going for. It doesn't exactly meet up with that road where we want it to, so let's figure that out. That's where I want it to meet up. So let's see. I think that works a little better. And that meets up. Great. And yeah, let's continue that same block size over here. I think I messed something up over here. terms of the angle that I was using. I think we need to fix that. That looks a little bit better. And in this location, I want to continue this road, but I don't want it to continue going straight. So right around here is where I would make a curve like that. And then probably add in one last road going across. That looks pretty decent to me. And now we can think about our paths. So now that we don't have anything zoned over here, I think I actually want to add in paths myself in pretty much all of these neighborhoods. We're having some severe worker problems, so I'm going to go ahead and pause before these get too out of hand. I want to make sure that we can fill in this neighborhood with residential, and we'll pause before we actually start simulating again. So I'm going to quickly add in paths to all these neighborhoods. Alright, so we have added paths to this neighborhood. I think it looks pretty okay, and we are ready to start zoning. Now, before we start zoning, I actually want to consider something that I haven't introduced yet, and that is setting districts. Now, very similar to how we set the park area for our soon-to-be city park, we can also designate city districts. So they use the same painting tool, but they are distinct from the park area that we defined. So let's actually figure out some areas that make sense to capture as distinct districts. And I'll explain some of the advantages of assigning districts in a bit. I think I see three areas that make sense to me. One of them would be this large chunk of property over here, kind of to the left of this park. Another one would be this chunk of property that borders the other side of the park. And the other would be, this bit that is a little bit closer to the road. So I'm going to go ahead and, grab those districts now. Alright, so we just created three different districts, Pleasant Hills, Ivy Hills, and Pleasant Park. The auto-generated names of these districts and park areas aren't very great, so I am open to suggestions on naming. I don't want to go too crazy with the naming, but I think it would also be cool to have some idea of a theme or something that we can base our different neighborhoods on. One of the reasons why I created the districts is because I want to start thinking about having unique specializations in each area. If we go over to our policies, we can start to set city policies regarding services, taxation, and city planning on our different areas. So, first we can consider services that we want to set at the city level, things that apply always, and something like parks and recreation makes sense to me. Across the board, we can increase our parks and plazas budget by 20%, but we also get a really, really large land value boost around it. I like that, so let's go ahead and set that. So that's a policy citywide, but it also affects the various districts. Now, if we wanted to override that setting in, say, Pleasant Park, we can go into the policies specific to that district and unset it. I do want to keep it, so we'll set that back again. Another advantage that we get is we can also have different zoning specializations. So if we go back into our districts tool and select the residential specializations, you'll notice some of these, in our residential areas, you can apply a zoning policy to have self-sufficient buildings. This will make assets that are eco-friendly. They use solar electricity, so they will consume less electricity, consume less garbage, and as a result produce less tax income. I think even just considering the visual appeal of the assets is a cool thing to do. So maybe we want to set that in Ivy Hills and have Ivy Hills be somewhat of a green district. The commercial specializations also have an organic and local produce specialization that we can use. So everything in here is going to be very, very eco-friendly. Think solar panels, Whole Foods, that type of stuff. We're not going to do the same over here. We can get granular with our policies in the future, but I think what we have will work for now. Before I start zoning, I know you're all eager to see how this turns out. I do want to consider some vital city services in this area. Our elementary school availability is fairly low, and I want to make sure we don't run into problems with education. So I definitely want to place at least one elementary school. I think right here makes sense. And we also have access to a high school, which we definitely want to think about. So I want this to cover a bit more than just a small area. So maybe somewhere like this would work well. That's going to give a nice boost to all the citizens living around it. So I'm just going to click through and see if there's any other services I'm missing. I think we probably also want a medical clinic around here. And how are we doing on our fire? Our fire is not fantastic, but it's also not bad. We haven't had any fire emergencies yet, so I think I'll hold off. Police, same thing. And parks, we are going to be placing a city park right here that will give a significant boost to the area, though I do think we could, place parks around here. Something interesting, like, let's say a botanical garden. It's a fairly large asset, so I'm going to have to take out paths for it. I'm okay with that. And the path is gone completely. That's okay. So that'll give a nice boost to the land around it. Let's add water, and then we can start zoning. All right, so now we can figure out our zoning. Let's stick to our already established pattern of having commercial on our collector. Let's find a few spots that make sense to have additional commercial activity. Maybe here. Maybe a little bit in here. And I think we can leave it at that for now. So let's just dedicate the rest to residential, aside from this little spot right here. Now we can dedicate the rest to residential. And I'm going to let this sim as I start to build. There's such a high demand for residential that we can just move along. Now I am noticing that the way that the grid appearing isn't exactly super clear. I'm going to see if adjusting one of these settings will help. I think that helped a tiny bit. And you know what? I think I can just get away with doing this right here. No need to zone all that by hand. We are going to leave room in our park. So that is quite a large neighborhood that we just zoned. I'm excited to see what happens there. I do want to make sure that our local roads connecting to the collector have stop signs present. And aside from that, I kind of want to see how this develops. We have severe worker issues, and my hope is that that will really help. So let's take a look at our neighborhood and keep an eye on our workers. Now we can see that the worker issues have become so severe that the building itself is being abandoned entirely. That's not fantastic, but it's also not the end of the world. What this means is that the building is sitting idle. It's taking up a zoning slot. We can delete it ourselves or just let it die on its own. I'm okay with letting these just die, fall off the face of the earth. It will mean that we have slightly reduced tax income, but as this area starts to fill in, I'm sure there will be an increased demand for industrial, so a lot of these buildings will rezone and they will have workers this time around. So, you know, we didn't really mess up here. We could have built this residential area a bit sooner. It's my bad for waiting, but I'm not too worried about it. We're still in a good spot. So I'm now okay actually letting this sim for a bit. I want to see how our budget, what happens to our budget. I want to get some money in the bank, and then we can start to approach this city park we've been talking about. So I'm going to let this go for a bit and see what happens. All right, and just like that, we reached another milestone. We are now at Boomtown. Some of the big things that come with this milestone involve transportation options. So up until now, everyone either walks, bikes, or drives to their destination. We now have an ability to provide various alternative forms of transportation. We won't be visiting any of these today, but in the future we can think about probably placing a bus line and or a tram line. Part of my objective with this series is going to be placing all forms of transportation, so we will get to visit those at some point. We have a lot more policies, which I'll check out right now, and we have a lot of road options. We also have some new options for death care. So considering the folks in our community that die, we need to do something with them, so we will want to place down a cemetery right away. We have some additional options for elder care and child care, and some other utility buildings. I think the most important thing right now is that we place a cemetery to take care of that death need. Now, I don't quite understand it, but our citizens really do enjoy living by a cemetery, so it's actually a fine thing to place in a residential neighborhood. We did designate a lot of this as commercial. If we maybe relocate some of that commercial to over here, then I feel good taking out that block and just saying nothing is going to zone there. One trick that we can use is placing fences alongside our roads to actually remove the ability to zone. So maybe that wasn't the best type of fence. Maybe we can use, I think a forestry fence would look a little bit more appropriate. You know, I think if we place that right there, that might not be crazy. We can also place a few trees, and maybe that will look nice along the cemetery. I think that actually looks just fine. Very similar to the landfill, the cemetery has a finite capacity and will fill up over time. It will warn us when it fills up. We will just have to place an additional cemetery. When we reach the appropriate milestone, we will have the ability to place a crematorium, which will process dead bodies. So let's go back to seeing how our city develops. Okay, so we still are seeing, worker issues. We do have quite a few abandoned buildings. That's fine. I think now is an appropriate time to think about that city park we've been talking about. So for the rest of this episode, I'm going to focus on actually building this park and seeing how that impacts our land value. Let's check that out ahead of time to see where we're at. So, some of the denser areas now are starting to really take shape, and have a fairly good land value. I really do think placing this here will boost the value of a lot of things around it. So I'm excited to see what happens. Now, the first thing that we'll do, we already have the park area designated, which is this right here. So what we can do now is actually start placing some of the assets. Now, the most important thing to get started is the park main gate. I think it makes sense to be placed alongside a path or a road. There's going to be supposedly a lot of traffic coming in from this main collector, so I think right there is a good spot for our main gate. Placing that now gives us access to some different amenities and assets that we're going to start placing. So we can also place a few side gates, which we're going to want to do for sure. I think right there is a good spot, and maybe right here is a good spot for side gates. So that gives us kind of a couple points of entry into the park where we can start placing paths. A lot of these different modular city parks feed off of the path system. So we'll want to start by building a good path network where our citizens can use it to walk around. So everything that we build will kind of extend from the path network that we lay down. So I'm just trying to make some nice connections so that things make sense. I don't love when the paths meet up with the road, so I'm going to try to avoid that. It's not always going to be perfect, but that's okay. Sometimes you have to just keep retrying and see what works. Okay, I don't love that right there. Let's see if we can have this meet up. Okay, that's not bad. The next thing we'll do is actually frame this park area with fences. Now, I'm noticing something, which is there's a significant gap between our roads and our zonable area. So I was kind of just reminded that we're still using these gravel roads. If I place these fences right now and then upgrade to paved roads, I'm going to have some real problems with having to move some stuff around. I want to avoid that as much as possible. So before I continue with this park area, I think I'm going to go around the city and upgrade all of my gravel roads into paved roads. I'm going to zoom through this because it will take some time, but I think I'd rather get it out of the way right now. Now here's a spot where I'm actually running into some issues. It's not letting me upgrade this because I have an asset that is directly alongside that road, so before I can upgrade it, I'll have to relocate it. And now I can go in and upgrade it. That's why these things can be a little bit of a pain. Alright, so I am actually pleasantly surprised. There was only a single instance of me having to move an existing building to accommodate the larger roads, and that was this elementary school. So overall, I'd say that upgrade went pretty well. So we have now moved past the era of having gravel roads, and we exclusively have 1 and 2 lane paved roads. So I'm pretty excited about that. Now let's go back to our city park and build the fences that we talked about. You'll notice that the zonable grid is now much closer to the road, and so we can place our fences in a much better location. So I'm going to try to butt them right up against the road such that I am not able to inadvertently zone alongside the road. And again, I'll have to kind of get cute with it sometimes and fudge it a little bit. Like I might have to, yeah, it doesn't really love that road. I think it interferes with that fence. Maybe I can get rid of that road, build the fence, and put the road back. That worked out okay. Kind of annoying, but it works. Let's finish the rest of our fences. All right, so now our park is enclosed by fences. So folks visiting the park must come through one of the main entrances. So we can actually click into this little icon and look at our park. You'll notice it has 1 stars. Each of these areas can range in rating anywhere from 1 to 5 stars. So we are getting a little close on this episode. I don't think it's going to be realistic to bring this all the way to 5 stars today, but we can at least start to plop down some of our major assets so that in the future we can get this to 5 stars. So first, I'm going to make this park free. We will lose money on it. That's okay. I don't want folks to have to pay for a city park ever, so by default, I'm going to make those types of parks free. Now, as far as policies go, we can, tweak some settings to accommodate for various things that we want. We can pay money to draw more visitors. I don't think I want to do that because we're going to lose a lot of money on the park as a result. Though we can designate this as our main park. We don't have any other parks yet, so I think it's okay to say this is our city's, pride and joy. We want folks to visit this park. Let's add celebrate, even more fun, and recycle garbage. So I don't think recycling garbage actually affects this city park, but I turned it on because I think we'd want to do that anyways in a city park. So that's fine. So in order to level up, maybe we can do 1 level up and call it a day. In order to level up, we want to have 500 visitors, and we want the entertainment value to increase to 220. Well, the entertainment value comes from the different assets that we place, so we can start to place some of those. This is a park cafe, so I think, near the entrance, we would want a park cafe and maybe some restrooms to accompany that cafe. We also may want a park info booth as well, which we'll include by the main entrance, and maybe we can include one. It doesn't seem to fit right there, but if we play with the fences, we can probably get it to fit pretty nice. Not at all. Not a chance. So maybe we just bring the fence right up to that asset and call it a day. I'm okay with that. That's fine with me. I don't think anyone's going to sneak in. I really don't know how that mechanic works in the game, so that's okay. Our entertainment value is now higher than it needs to be, but I do want to make sure we place all of the assets that we can. So I think this might be a reasonable spot for a central plaza. If we build that there, then we hopefully still have the ability to build a path right there. Great, so we'll extend off of that in the future. In fact, maybe I can just square that off. Okay, so this isn't the sexiest park at all, but we're going to start to get some visitors in here. Maybe we can do something like line the park with some trees. I think we'd want to do that. And maybe we can try to match, or at least try to match, the existing style of tree that's already here. Yeah, let's do that. I'm just going to line the park with some trees. All right, so this may not be perfect. You may want to critique my landscaping skills, but we now have a city park with some trees. I think it's going to be quite a while before we get to 500 visitors, so I think we'll just let that happen naturally throughout the course of the game. I don't think it makes sense for us to sit and wait for that to happen. So I think we will take a quick overview of our city. You know, today we built this interesting residential neighborhood, took care of a lot of our demands, and our city has grown. Most of the issues with industry over here have cleared up, and we now have factories that have taken their spot. So I think overall we're in a really good spot, and I'm happy ending here for today. In the next episode, we will, of course, be adding to our city park, but we'll also start to think about somewhat of a larger expansion and figuring out where the next area is that we want to expand to. So thanks for watching, and definitely feel free to leave suggestions in the comments.